What's up, gamers? Welcome to Right Gamer. Today we're going to be talking about this interview as it relates to Redfall. Okay? So, is this your basic corporate electronic arts apology? Excuses? No, it isn't. Is it still your basic corporate apology and excuses? Yes, it is. How is the interview? Does the interview view itself as this is a big person in the gaming industry, so we cannot ask him the hard-hitting questions that may make him fumble like a 49er football player? Yeah, it's your basic interview. They want to be safe. That way they can be able to interview other people. So, one thing we're going to talk about is this gentleman and this gentleman both mentioned to Phil Spencer about him showing up, praising that. I think this gentleman does it as well, for showing up to the interview, given the controversy surrounding Redfall and other stuff. Now, this gentleman over here also mentions when he had an interview in a Animal Crossing setting, and at the time there was some Halo controversy, and he wasn't expecting him to show up, but he did. Here's my iteration. I'm not going to sit here and praise Phil Spencer for showing up to an interview when, from his point of view, from his perspective, it objectively makes no sense for him not to show up. Because anyone with a remote amount of common sense could already imagine all of the articles and all of the YouTube videos that would pop up because Phil Spencer decided to cancel the interview with Funny Xcast, or if we travel back in time to when this gentleman did his Animal Crossing interview, same thing. There have been plenty of articles and videos surrounding Phil Spencer cancels Animal Crossing interview because he's scared to talk about the downfall of Halo. That actually sounds like an exact clickbait article that would have existed if he didn't show up. And you take any kind of clickbait article if he wouldn't have showed up to this interview, and we have the same thing that's going to take place. So objectively, from his point of perspective, it makes no sense not to show up, because that would just, it would just stir up more shit in the pot that he already has filled up. Another thing is that they don't really ask the hard-hitting questions. When they're talking about Redfall, and Phil Spencer's response is pretty much focusing on mock reviews, bugs, glitches, and how many people didn't, the game didn't crash on them because they have that kind of statistic, yada, yada, yada. And then, of course, that doesn't mean that, it's not an issue, it's not a problem. But yeah, at no time do any of these individual interviewers bring up other thoughts that I've seen gamers have. And that is the fact that this game launched without 60 frames a second, which is objective proof that it was not ready to be released. This is also a game that was developed by a company that kind of is more focused on what we call single player, world developing, character developing type games. And now they have went outside of their comfort zone, what they're used to developing. And you can clearly tell that from the game itself, outside of the context of bugs and glitches, that objectively the game was not ready for launch. Especially when you can watch people play this game and they run across the entire map or half of the map and don't run into any enemies. That does not sound like a game that is ready to launch. But again, at no time do any of these interviewers bring up that side of the argument that gamers have in regards to this game not being ready to launch. Because Spencer's whole focus on why the game not being delayed kind of revolves around just the mundane, generic question of bugs and glitches. But there's more in context to the problem that gamers have in relation to Redfall. So, at the end of the day, Phil Spencer gives a generic corporate apology and response. Nowhere near the level of Electronic Arts. So I'll give him props for not being that douchebaggy. I'm not giving him props for showing up to the interview, because anyone with common sense would know that would raise a whole other shitstorm on the internet itself. And second, these individuals probably should practice their interviewing questions and not be afraid to ask the hard-hitting questions. In fact, people that do interviews, please learn how to hit the hard-hitting questions. Because usually in a controversy, there's more than one side or explanation to the problems within a game from the perspective of a gamer themselves. And for a channel that clearly focuses around video games, you're not asking full questions in regards to the controversy surrounding Redfall. So that's a failure on them, and it's also a failure on Phil Spencer, because he should also know, outside of the context of the bugs and glitches, that there are other issues that people have, but he chose to either ignore it, or maybe, honestly, he doesn't really know, which I doubt it. Because again, this is a multi-million-dollar business. This is a game that was supposed to release in Game Pass as their first-party release, and you're going to tell me that they weren't aware that this game objectively, not my opinion, was not ready for launch. My name's Kevin. This is Right Gamer. Hope you enjoyed this video in some fashion or form.